Hello and welcome to this show. When Goodreads put out their winners from the Goodreads Choice Awards, I set out with a goal to read all the Goodreads Choice Awards winners. But then I didn't try that hard, and here we are. I'm kind of finished. I'm saying that I'm finished. I mean, I did read 16 out of 20 books. Well, actually 15, because one book won 2 categories, but still, I mean, it's fine. So, what I thought I would do here today is just rank all of these books that I've read and then just judge people for what they think is good and that I don't think is good. Yes, it's a real deep dive here today at the show. First out at the last place, we have 5 Feet Apart by Rachel Lippincott. The story is about 2 teenagers that are both sick and they have to stay in a hospital, and first they don't like each other because they're so different, but then they start liking each other, but no, they can't touch each other because their sickness makes it so that they can only be, you guessed it, 5 feet apart. And then they fall in love. I don't get why people like this book so much. Sure, I usually don't like romance novels at all. This one is one of the reasons why I don't like romance novels. We've seen all of these things before. There's nothing unique with this book. We've had teenagers at hospitals before, and that when they're sick and there's this new weird sickness that people have never heard of before, or it's kind of mystified. It was just boring. I've read some reviews where people are talking about how they're disappointed with how the sickness is portrayed, and I'm not gonna say anything bad about that because I didn't even know that it existed before reading this book, so I can't really have an opinion on it. And even if it didn't feel real, this is a wish fulfillment book. It's this romance novel for young adults, and I can't. Those books are never realistic. They're not supposed to be realistic. So I can't really be mad because they weren't sick enough or they weren't hurting enough. On place number 14, we have Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. And this was the winner of both the romance novel as well as the debut category. The story is about the Prince of Wales and the President's son. And first they hate each other, but then they start liking each other, but then they are scared, but then they aren't scared, but then they are scared, but then they aren't scared. And then the world cheers. Spoilers. This is also a wish fulfillment story. I had so high expectations about this book. There were so many people that had talked about it and really praised it a lot. Yeah, it just felt really cute and fun, and then all my expectations were crushed. You shouldn't really go into a book thinking that, ooh, this will be really good, because when it's not, it's just sad. And I got bored and it was so repetitive. It just was the same event happening over and over in just new settings, and sometimes not even in new settings. No, this was not my cup of tea. Anywho, on place number 13, we have The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. Okay, yeah. Michaelides, I don't know. This story is about a therapist or psychologist that is very fascinated by this one woman who murdered her husband, and then she just stopped talking and she has never talked again, and he believes he is the only one that can make her talk. Yeah, this was good about up until halfway of the story. Like the mystery was very interesting, just finding out about why she stopped talking and why she murdered her husband and why this man is so fascinated by her. All of this just unraveling. But then when you get about halfway, I just lost interest, because like every character that the main protagonist met, they were awful. They were not like they were poorly written. Even the protagonist hated them so much, and they were so evil and dark and creepy. And like when not even the protagonist can feel any interest in speaking to these different characters, why am I as a reader supposed to enjoy learning about these characters and reading about them? It just fell short. And I mean, I had to look this book up just now before talking about it, because it was so forgettable. Even if the mystery is like, it's kind of okay, but I didn't remember anything about it. I remember that there was a woman that stopped talking, but then like, what happened? I stopped caring about what happened in the middle of the book, and so I just wanted to get through it. And then yeah, I couldn't even remember it the next day. So that's a good grade. In place number 12, we have Desi Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And this was the winner in the historical fiction category. The story is about this made-up rock band that took over the world in the 70s. What I liked about this book was how realistically written it is. Even though I knew when I went in that this band didn't exist in real life, I still wanted to like Google it and make sure that I hadn't forgotten about this huge band that conquered the world, but they didn't. Thing I had a problem with this book was the amazing memories of all of the characters. So it's written like an interview. The interviewer is interviewing. Yeah, that's a good sentence. She was talking to all these different band members and friends and family, and they give this statement about what happened with this rock band that existed 40 years ago. And all of these people are old now, but they remember with such vivid detail, like every conversation and what people wore and how they had their hair up and where they stood. And this was a band that they say so many times that they were always drinking and they took drugs, and especially the main protagonist, Desi Jones. She was always high or like taking drugs. And she can remember things so clearly. I mean, I can't even remember what I ate yesterday, barely what I ate today. And here she is remembering things like from 30, 40 years ago. It's amazing, but it kind of takes you out of the realism. But other than that, it's a fun story, and it had kind of a Da Vinci vibe to it. I'm not saying that it's like this thriller with chasing and people hurting themselves with sticks and all of that. It's not like that, but the realism that makes you question what's real and not. On number 11, we have Dear Girls by Ali Wong. And I'm not sure I'm seen anymore. It doesn't matter. This was the winner in the humor category. This is a book that Ali Wong writes herself about her life, just growing up in America and dating and finding a husband and being a mother and working in a place where there are more men than women. I listened to it as an audiobook, and even though I felt like it was a bit too much sometimes, Ali Wong has a flair for the dramatic, and she could go from like one sentence being all like angry and shouting and swearing, and then it's so sweet and soft. It's kind of difficult to know what you're supposed to feel, because it's like high up there and then it goes low and then up again, and it's never like a neutral voice, but instead it just shifts between these two extremes, which made it really weird when listening to it. One thing I really liked with this book was the honesty of it. There are so many books where people gloss over the darker parts, but Ali, she really talks about being a mother, and like the high expectations she had, and then how all that was crushed, and how it really is to have children, and what that did to her body and her life in general. And yeah, I think we need more of these kinds of books that are not scared to really tell the truth, instead of just saying that you can have it all and you can do everything and just fight. Just have more books that say that it's okay, that it's hard, it will be difficult sometimes in your life. On number 10, we have Over the Top by Jonathan Van Ness. And this was the winner of the memoir and biography category, something like that. It's one category at least, never mind. He writes this book about his life from being a child to being an adult and being on Queer Eye, and how all of that has changed him. He talks about finding his inner life, struggling with drug abuse, sex addiction, and also being sexually abused as a young child. And Jonathan Van Ness is such a happy and cheerful guy on TV, so you don't really think that a person like that should have gone through so many dark parts in their life. It's really interesting to see behind that happy face, to know more about him. And I've been following Jonathan since Game of Thrones, and no, I did not misspoke. You can look it up on YouTube. It's amazing, and you should all watch it because it's amazing. I recommend people to listen to the audiobook instead of reading the book. I mean, you can read the book as well, but really listen to the audiobook, because he narrates it himself, and his voice, it's just amazing, and it feels so much more alive. It's like listening to a podcast. The only qualm I had with this book was that it kind of didn't feel finished towards the end, because he goes into so much detail about his life and all the dark parts, but then he starts talking in like the last 40 minutes or something about getting on Queer Eye, and then it's like all of his life is fixed and there's no problems anymore, and he's learned to love himself, and it's a weird jump, because everything gets so happy and wonderful like right at once, and then it's just something in the past. It's not something he carries with him anymore. There should have been like 1 or 2 chapters between the darkness to Queer Eye, to make it flow a little bit better. On place number 9, we have Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs by Caitlin Doughty. This was the winner of the Science and Technology category. It's a non-fiction book. It's a mortician that just talks about questions she's gotten over the years from children about death. If you can keep the skull of a loved one that's died, or if you can bury your pet together with you when you die, how you can see that someone died in different ways depending on how the color of your face when you've died. A lot of fun tidbits. Death is a kind of dark topic, but she manages to make it kind of like light-hearted and doesn't delve in too deep. Yeah, it kind of feels like a book that I could see parents reading together with their children, but it's also like things for people that just want to know like general things about life and death. It's not a book for those that want a deep dive into the life of a mortician. Then you should probably find some other book, but for most people, I think this would be a fun book to read, just like a chapter here and there. On number 8, we have Recursion by Blake Crouch, and this was the winner of the science fiction category. It's about a future that feels like it's kind of right now. It's not sci-fi like Star Trek. It's more like now Trek. Yeah. And there's this thing called false memory syndrome, or FMS, that's starting to take over the world, where people are getting these false memories or these new memories of lives they haven't lived, but for them it feels like they are real and they are unable to separate them from their actual life. This is causing a lot of people to feel really confused about their own lives, because some might remember that they married someone else and had another child, but that child doesn't exist in this life. And then we follow this cop that is trying to figure out what this actually is, what's happening with the world. And it starts out kind of slow and it's a bit confusing because not that much is explained. It's kind of like testing the waters. When a certain event takes place, it just starts going and it's getting so weird, mind-blowing, and it's amazing. In number 7, we have Girl Stop Apologizing by Rachel Hollis. And this was the winner of the non-fiction category. I don't know what these other categories were that also were non-fiction, but this is some kind of random non-fiction category. I don't care. This is about finding your inner energy and just going for your dreams and don't caring about what other people think. Just if you want to do something, you have to get to it. And this book talks about different ways to like going for your dreams and how it all boils down to just doing it and just finding the time. I know that this is the book in itself isn't that controversial, but Rachel is a kind of controversial person, and there are certain stuff in this book that I don't really agree with. She talks about like mental health, like if you just put on a smile and think happy thoughts, then everything will be wonderful and you will never feel sad. Or she talks about weight things, and it's kind of maybe she should have skipped those parts, but other than that, there's so much good stuff in this book about like going for your dreams and just doing the things you want to do and not caring about other people. That's also part of the problem with this book, because it's so fragmented. There are so many things that she wanted to put in there, and she even says so in like somewhere in the book that when she was supposed to turn in this, it was supposed to be finished, she was like stuffing in another chapter because she felt like, oh, I want to talk about this issue as well. And I get that she wants to talk about all these things, but it's not good when it's too much of different things that's stuffed into a book, because you can't really take in anything. It just becomes like it's too much. I mean, there's kind of a red thread because it's this whole chase your dream, but it doesn't feel like it when you're reading the book, because first you have this thing and then you have this thing and then you have this thing, and it's not connected. My favorite part is actually when she talks about how to set up your goals and how to like make sure that you really go for them, and that you have like smaller goals and then you have bigger, and then so this is the main one, and then how you will get there. And it's really tangible, and she has examples, but I can't remember much about it at all because it was such a short part, and then she was off to the next thing. I could have had a whole book centered around this thing, but no, that's not what we got. And then there are parts that's really aimed toward mothers, and I get that, but it's not relevant to for me. So maybe this book could have been just aimed at mothers, and then that would have been a thing, but everything's not aimed at mothers, so it's so much. Yeah, there's a lot of good things, and I really enjoyed reading it, except for some parts, of course. On place number 6, we have Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This was the winner of the fantasy category. This is about this dark society at Yale, and we follow this woman that can see ghosts, talk to them in some way, and there are other things and ghouls and magic and probably a lot of other stuff. It was very confusing. It's not a bad book. I mean, Leigh Bardugo is a master of creating these dark and twisted and really interesting worlds that you just want to fall into them. But like I said, it's a really confusing story, and I'm not even sure I got what it was about. I mean, I love reading fantasy, and fantasy that has so many characters, because it's fun to know about like all these different people instead of just following one person. I couldn't remember who anyone was. I mean, I could remember maybe 3 characters, like the main protagonist, one man that was gone, so you didn't see much of him, and a ghost. Those I knew who they were, but the others, they were just like interchanging. I don't know, they just felt like the same. All the women were the same and all the men were the same, and it was really confusing. And then there's some like darker parts as well. I'm not sure it needed to be there. It felt like a bit too much. It's an interesting story, but on number 5, we have The Wicked King by Holly Black, and this was the young adult fantasy sci-fi winner or something like that. I don't know. This is book number 2 of 3, and it's about this magical like forest land or something. I don't know, this magical place where there are kings and queens, and there's a war with the water people, and also fairies don't really like humans. This is a fun book. I mean, there's so much going on, and the characters are just fun and cute, and there's like these dark secrets, and ooh, he's with her, and but then he's not, and there's so much happening. And I mean, because I didn't read the first book, I should have been more confused than I was, but this book was really good at explaining what had happened before, so I didn't really feel like I needed to read the first book to understand anything. And like the things I missed, they were like background things, so they didn't really matter, but the bigger parts I got. And it's not such a deep book. It's very lighthearted and fun. You don't really need to know that much. It's fun characters that roam around, and there's love triangles, and there's smut, and there's just weird things going on, and fun dialogues. And I know I'm saying fun a lot, but it really is a fun book. And you can judge me all you want for liking smut as much as I do, but come on. It is. I'm not gonna say it again, but it is. So, yeah. Sometimes that's all we need. We just need some smut in our lives. On number 4, we have The Testaments by Margaret Atwood. This was the winner in the fiction category, which is also a very weird category. And now there's a lot of animals just screaming. That's how it is when you're socially distancing. A lot of screaming. Yes, I get it. I want to scream as well. We follow three different women, and it's about Gilead. It's a continuation about the land Gilead that Margaret Atwood first wrote about in The Handmaid's Tale. This is just a train wreck, but who cares? It is what it is. We follow these three women that have very different roles to play, but it's all very important and very interesting to follow. I mean, this book, when I first read The Handmaid's Tale, I felt like, yeah, I don't need another book about this land. This is enough with this one. I don't get that much information, and it's just one point of view, and it's not many emotions or anything. When I read this one, it's like, yeah, okay, I'm fine with there being more information about Gilead because it was so interesting to find out about these different lives. I mean, Aunt Lydia is the best one of them all, and I don't think anyone will argue with me on that. She's just an interesting character. And one thing I really liked about this book was that, I mean, I'm going to compare it to Handmaid's Tale, so deal with it. In Handmaid's Tale, it was so dark and like there was no light at all, barely. But this book, here you see that, I mean, it's kind of funny. There's jokes and it's dark humor, but it's still funny. I mean, I like that it shows that there are so many sides to this land, and depending on who you're following, they will have a completely different story. The story is a little bit predictable. You can kind of guess what will happen, but it doesn't really matter because it's to follow their journeys. That's the fun part, that's the interesting thing. So, in most books, when it's easy to guess what will happen, that kind of ruins the book. But here, I mean, I don't care. It's fine. Oh, it's so you can't see me at all. Or can you? I don't know. I am here. Light, go away. In place number 3, we have The Institute by Stephen King, and this was the winner of the horror category. This book is about a small boy that is kidnapped in the middle of the night when he's sleeping, and the kidnappers brings him to this big building, this institute, where he is imprisoned together with a bunch of other children, and a lot of bad things happened at this institute. It's not a fun place to be. This was my first ever Stephen King book that I've read, and I get it now. I get why people really like Stephen King. I mean, for people that's read a lot of Stephen King, maybe this is nothing special, but I thought it was so good. It's so exciting. And it's just like from page 1, there's stuff happening, and you just feel with all these characters and want everything to work out for them because it's so dark and creepy. But it's also good with this book because it's a like classic good versus evil book, and sometimes we need that, just like we sometimes need smut. Sometimes we need books where we know who the bad guy is and we know who the good guy is, and I really enjoy this book, but I don't recommend reading it before going to sleep because I had nightmares about being kidnapped. In place number 2, I can't. Ooh. In place number 2, we had Shout by Laurie Halsey Anderson, and this was the winner of the poetry category. This is an amazing book. I mean, everybody should read this book. I don't care who you are, how old you are, you should read this book. Oh my god, it's so amazing. It's not very lighthearted, but it's not supposed to be. But oh my god, how I loved it! But I wasn't able to. I wasn't able to like read more than a few pages at a time because there's so much to think about, and it just leaves you just sitting around and just thinking about life. Yeah, sometimes you need to do that as well. There's a lot of things you need to do apparently. Sometimes you need to change the camera as well, but you're too lazy to do it. Anyway, this book was magic, and it's such, yeah, I don't even know how to explain it, but I feel like it's an important book for everyone to read. I mean, it handles a lot of questions around sexual assault and abuse, and for those who have gone through that, of course, this is important to feel like someone else understands. But I also think it's really important for other people to read it who hasn't gone through that, because they really need to understand. So yeah, just I just want everyone to read it. Just read it. Anyway, in number 1, we have Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell and Faith Erin Hicks. This was the comic book winner. And sure, there are a lot of really good winners of the different categories. This just deserves to win because it's such a wonderful and colorful story about friendship and love, and it's cute and you feel warm inside, and there's like you have the main story happening and then there's like small things happening like in the background, and I just loved all of it, and it went by so fast. And I feel like this is a book that you can read a lot of times, and I enjoyed it from page 1 to last page. I mean, from here on out, I want all of my YA contemporary books to be in comic book format. So please make that happen because I need more of it.